Mics on, sound, lights, and recording. Welcome one and all to the all-new ThyGap podcast. This is your favorite host, Being Brute, and with me is...
Bogus Noog.
Welcome to the new episode, Bogus. What's up? What's happening, bro?
Oh, what can I say? Had a fuck all week.
Fuck all week.
Yeah.
It's not like a weekend. It's like
No.
a whole week.
The whole week was completely fucked.
What happened?
Well, I had some work with the bank. And it may sound innocuous to other people, but you have to understand what my bank is. Bro, my favorite bank in the whole world is the State Bank of India.
SBI.
SBI.
Is your favorite bank?
I think is the greatest bank in the world because they'll never be technologically up to date
Okay.
and they'll never be tech savvy, even if their lives depended on it.
You mean to say they don't use fancy stuff like ThyGap does?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
no social media? Like, do they have an account on Instagram like we do?
I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Okay. Do they have like a Twitter handle like we do?
You mean at ThyGap?
Yeah.
And Instagram at _ThyGap?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
And can you communicate with them like on an electronic mail format?
Yeah, you can, but every branch has its own email address and it starts with the branch name followed by some random numbers, then some dots, and it's a whole thing. Like even if you're looking at it on a piece of paper, you wouldn't be able to replicate it. It's that complicated.
So it's not like mindthygap@gmail.com. It's not simple like that.
It is not as simple and sweet as mindthygap@gmail.com at all.
Now, Bogus, you caught my attention.
Yeah.
There's a bank out there in the world. In this day and age of software advancement and technological evolution,
Yes.
they are still predominantly manual.
I've always had a love-hate relationship with this bank because on one side, the hate comes from the fact that they are not tech-savvy at all. They'll never be tech-savvy in their whole life. Generations could change. They'll still be a century behind. But the love comes from the fact that there is a lot of trust in that. I can trust that my money is safe because it is so hard for me to take my own money out of the bank. So I think of it like, wow, if they make me come to the branch like 10 times just to withdraw my own money from the bank, there's no hope for any hackers.
No phishing mails can work.
Absolutely. It doesn't work with SBI. It's impossible because even when you have to log into their website, you of course have a username password, which after a few days they disable because they're like, no, for your safety.
No, they forgot the admin user password. Like they just like, oh, how do we log into this shit, man?
They're like, oh, this same password for more than 90 days, you're not safe. This is not going to work. Okay, can I change it? Come to the branch. So for every little thing you have to do, you have to kind of go to the branch and you have to do paperwork. And it's not any other branch. Now, SBI is the largest bank, I think, in Asia, if I'm not wrong.
Is it?
They have branches all over, so it's not like you have one branch nearby. You can just go there and get it done.
Yeah.
So you enter any other branch that is not your home branch.
Yeah. Or where your account resides.
Yeah, where your account resides. The first question they ask you is they look you up and down and say, which branch is your account in? And if you say, it's actually over there, but this is closer to my home and I came. Why don't you go there? Why are you coming here?
Do you even have any idea how many files that we have to see to figure out what's your account number?
I'm like, why do you have branches then?
Yeah, that is just to support the government and make you spend more petrol.
Yeah, it's just a huge Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan kind of a bank. But I love it for that because I know that my money is safe. And just to give you an idea, bro, the banks, they tend to send you emails, right? Every now and then.
Right.
If you're an account holder.
Yeah.
So SBI does the same, so they are at least up to date
With
to that
respect
extent.
to marketing.
Yeah. But at the top of every email they send you, there's a disclaimer. It says, internet is required to view this message.
On an email.
Inside the email.
Inside the email. It's not even like the subject or something.
No. It's inside the email. At the top of the body, there's a disclaimer. Internet is required to view this message. Well, if my internet was not working, I would not be able to see that in the first place.
Do you also have like another PS note saying that we send this mail through the internet, like with the help of internet, so maybe you need internet to read this
I think there might be. I just didn't read
Yeah,
it.
you didn't go through
I
that
didn't go
point,
through the
right?
fine
Yeah.
print, yeah.
The other thing that I also find, like now that you're saying, I think I should also have like an SBI account.
Everyone should, yeah.
Because it's not just the hackers and the fishers, where you can lose the money with or where your money is safe from. Safe is suppose tomorrow there's a government debacle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now the government is running to all the banks saying that, hey, send all the money to the revenue department.
Yeah.
What is that called?
Income tax department.
Yeah, whichever. Like
revenue service.
Revenue services, whatever, right? Reserve Bank, basically,
yeah.
right? Send it all the money and all the mails are going to all the big banks like HDFC, IC, and all of them are fretting.
Yeah.
5 months later, there's one guy in the SBI headquarters who's like, I think government sent us a mail. I think we are supposed to do something. And then 8 years later,
they'll reply to the email saying, you come to the branch.
Exactly. Like they are saying like, dear respected revenue officer of India, Reserve Bank. And then, remember that school formats of how you write like a professional letter?
Yeah.
Right. That's the kind of letter they are writing. And then they'll write it in an email. And then they'll print that email. And then they put it in an envelope and then address it to Reserve Bank of India.
Yeah.
And then they put the stamps and they send it across.
And
saying that, and in that mail, it is again written, please come to the branch.
And there's also a disclaimer on the top. Scan this document to read it on your computer.
With internet.
With internet.
Yes,
that's
it's important.
The keyword. That's the keyword.
Yeah.
Oh man. It's like once you want to take out like 10 rupees from your account, you have to go to the branch like 5 times.
5 times. It's almost like how, I know you don't like this show, but Friends mein, Rachel is living with her daughter at Joey's place. So the whole house is baby proof.
Right.
And Joey doesn't know how to make it anti-baby proof. So he's struggling with the fridge to, take out a beer or something and he's not able to. And he keeps getting pissed off. So finally he's able to open the fridge and he picks up a beer and then he thinks for a second like, I better take whatever I can now because I don't know when I can open it again.
Right, exactly.
So it's almost like that,
it's
right?
almost like that.
Yeah, that's intense.
State Bank of India never change.
Don't change.
Never
Hashtag.
change. The other benefit of that is this is the only bank where you are forced to build a relationship with the staff.
Yeah.
Because you meet them so often, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm sure.
Arey, you came yesterday.
Yeah.
So I've been coming for the last week.
And they still don't remember why you came yesterday.
Yeah.
They're like, they start the story from, which branch?
Which branch?
Which branch is your account? SBI folks are intense. I think I don't have an account in SBI, but I did hear stories about SBI.
I strongly recommend it, bro. If there's any amount that you think, if the rest of my wealth gets stolen or whatever, I want this money to be my backup fund.
Yeah.
That should be in SBI.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to even let you take it.
Like, I'm going to die in few days. Like, come to the branch.
Yeah.
We want to see you in person.
Write these 2-3 forms. Oh, God. But that's not the only reason, bro, why the last week was a bummer. This was a real bummer. But last week, one of the greatest modern stand-up comedians passed away. Norm MacDonald. I'm sure you know Norm.
I know Norm.
We all know Norm.
Peace to Norm MacDonald.
Yeah.
I think... I would let you take the stage. I know you are a bigger follower of Norm MacDonald.
Yeah, it's just he's one of those comedians who has his own mold. There's no one else like him. Take Mitch Hedberg. You take Norm MacDonald. Then you take, why am I missing his name? Or out of all names, the pillar, your favorite.
Don Rickles.
Don Rickles. God, I was blanking.
I would have punched you in the face.
I was blanking on Don Rickles.
How can you fucking black out on Don Rickles?
But like these comedians like Rickles and these guys, they have their own mold.
Yeah.
There's no one else before them. There's no one else after them.
Yeah.
Norm is one of those guys. Norm MacDonald, first name, American bum. Last name is like Scottish aristocracy.
Yeah.
So even in his name, there's a contradiction. And he's always been different from everyone else. He's also been known to be like a comedian's comedian.
Yeah.
Patrice O'Neill type.
Yeah.
And he's always known to be one of the most courageous comedians. He never towed the line of the establishment. And when people tend to have, this romanticized perception of comics or comedians, that they speak truth to power, and this is the front line for a society. They're the ones who kind of turn the mirror on the establishment.
Yeah.
But at least nowadays, the majority are not of that kind.
They're playing safe.
Everyone plays safe.
Yeah.
But we only had like a few people like Norm who still fit that mold, that idealistic, romanticized version of a stand-up comic.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why many other comics actually look up to
Yeah.
Norm MacDonald. So he passed away from cancer that he was battling from 10 years. And nobody knew about it. Like not even a soul. He has extremely close relations with David Letterman, Conan O'Brien. None of them knew about this. So it tells you something about the guy where all he wanted to do was he just wanted to make people laugh.
Yeah.
And he didn't care about garnering sympathy by saying, oh, I have cancer. Because there's a bunch of stand-up comics who
milked that.
Who milked it.
Yeah.
Netflix specials.
Not just stand-ups. I think there are a lot of celebrities. I mean, they sold it. Let's not say milk it. It's a little disrespectful.
That's true.
Yeah.
But even if you look at just the stand-up comics, right, there have been a few who kind of sold it.
Yeah.
Specials on them battling cancer.
Yeah.
Specials on sexual harassment. And it's
the
fine.
Demons. I think let's call them the demons. They sold their demons much harder or more aggressively than their art.
That's a good way of putting it. And even if you do it, it's not a problem. If you use that dark material to still make people laugh, you're still doing justice to your profession.
Yeah.
But these specials were not really funny.
Yeah, they were like documentaries.
They were like documentaries, and you were supposed to just sit in silence and feel pity for them or whatever. But Norm was not like one of these guys. Like from the very beginning, he was always in the face of all the power structures. You know, he got booted out of SNL because of the O.J. Simpson coverage that he used to do. He used to keep cracking jokes on O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
But the head of SNL had a close relationship with that guy.
Yeah.
So it didn't work out. They fired him. And it's great because when he left SNL, he started getting successful. He got his own TV show, sitcoms and all that.
Yeah.
So
he did a movie too, right?
He did a movie also. Like he did one with Don Rickles.
Yeah. That Bob, who's that guy? He's a tall guy. He was in that Full House TV show.
Saget.
Bob Saget.
Saget. Yeah. So 1.5 years after getting fired from SNL, SNL invites him back to be the host of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Norm goes up and every host has a monologue.
Right.
And it's a live show. You can't do anything.
Yeah.
So he goes up and says, I used to work in this show. I can't do Norm, but he has this twang in his voice. That's also unique.
Yeah.
But he said, I used to work here and they fired my ass.
Yeah.
Now 1.5 years after that, they invite me to be the host.
Yeah.
They fired me because they said I was not funny enough.
Yeah.
So either I'm really funny now or this show sucks.
Yeah.
And that was his opening line.
Yeah.
And then he said, it's going to be a terrible show with these few guests. And all that. It's great. So Norm has always been like that.
Yeah.
Great author. He really knew how to write.
I mean, I started following Norm MacDonald after I got to know. I actually saw this David Letterman show where Norm told about this incident with Don Rickles.
Yeah.
And then I saw his Howard Howard Stern's radio show. Where he was again describing when he worked with Don that all that you see in the movie was actually unscripted. Like he was like, I really was laughing. And the original script where I didn't have a line or there was no interaction between me and Don in the original script. But because I was laughing, Don just turned towards me and like, what are you laughing at, you horse?
Yeah.
Why don't you go back to whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then he was like, all this was like improv on the go. And that's because, how Don kind of unraveled that.
Yeah.
So obviously anybody who liked Don Rickles for me was my hero, right? Like I liked them too. And then I actually went and saw what kind of material he did. I think Norm used to do the news bit in SNL.
Yeah, Weekend Update.
And I think he also had that hint of insult comedy. Yeah. Right? Which could also be borderline sarcastic or whatever you say it. But again, I love his delivery. It was so nonchalant, right? It was almost like, that's it. The matter of fact is, it's funny, Yeah. And it's very few people, again, who could do that. Who could say something as a matter of fact and still make it sound funny.
Yeah.
I started seeing Seth Rogen trying to copy that of Norm. The two people who I really liked in that news bit that SNL used to do, one was Norm without doubt. The second one was David Spade.
Oh, Spade is a
David
goat.
Spade and Norm were the only guys who I think they killed that bit.
Yeah.
Right? They really, really took it to the next level. Everybody else just tried to copy it or hold fort, with that bit.
Yeah, Spade is known to be one of the funniest guys in Hollywood who is not a stand-up comic.
Who's not a stand-up comic, who's not mainstream comic too, right?
Yeah.
He's just a comic. It's. I feel the Indian version of David Spade is Vijay Jose.
Right.
In the sense, like, you don't find them when you want them.
Yeah.
You find them when they want you to find them, right? Again, we are digressing, but Norm, again, like you said, right? He is one of those guys. Oh, fuck, this is going to be a very serious episode. Norm, for me, was one of those raw guys.
Very, yeah. Yeah.
They are like, I'm here for comedy, and that's all you'll get from me. You know, don't expect mushy talk. Don't expect sugarcoating from me.
Yeah.
Don't expect I'll break my character because you are going through something.
Yeah.
And that is, for me, is the real deal, right?
Yeah.
And everything was in their stride.
Yeah.
And one of the beauties of I don't know if you know this, Norm MacDonald was telling a story about a conversation with his neighbor. And it's a very dumb fucking story.
Most of the stories are
right?
extremely dumb.
It doesn't have like a punchline.
Yeah.
It has nothing.
Yeah.
Literally nothing. It's just like he met eyes with his neighbor. He was doing gardening and he was doing something else in his front yard. And the neighbor was like, "Hi, welcome to the neighborhood. What do you do?" And then he said, "What do I do?" And then Norm asked him what he does. And he told some ridiculous job profile. Like he does something very weird. And Norm was like, "What does it mean?" And at every level, right, you are thinking that this is when the punch will come.
Yeah.
The punch never came.
Yeah.
And that made it so funny. And I was sitting there and thinking, you could make something sound funny even like this.
Yeah.
And that way, for me, Norm was very revolutionary. I personally could never even think of replicating what Norm does.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of his delivery or structuring or building a joke or building the punch or not punch. Norm doesn't have punch. He's not like Rodney Dangerfield where there is a one-liner punch every end of sentence. But it's just very uncanny what he does.
He does have punchlines, but it's very weird. It's different from everyone else. It's like one thing with Norm is you never see the punch coming.
Yeah.
And the other thing is he sets up a punch in a conventional timing.
Yeah.
So you think, oh, the joke is done.
Yeah.
But then he actually
keeps going on.
It keeps going after that. Then he gives the real thing at the end.
Yeah.
And then you're like completely taken off guard.
Yeah.
I think he only was able to do that because, like I said, he's a good writer.
Yeah.
He always had an extremely good command on language and structure and narrative.
Yeah.
And so he always played around with that.
Yeah.
But apart from his skills as a comic, he's also one of the bravest comics I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like there was this whole fad of comedy roasts, that they used to do.
Yes.
For different celebrities.
Right.
So they made the mistake of inviting Norm once.
Yeah.
And Norm, he detested that format.
Yeah.
It's like, what, you just go and insult these people?
Yeah.
And some of them are not even trying to be funny. They're just flat out crossing the line.
Yeah.
And
that's what we did in India.
Yeah.
Which we called roast, but I don't think so. That wasn't roast.
Yeah. Norm, he was talking about this. He said there was this roast that, I was invited to. And I forget who the celebrity was.
Yeah.
But someone, the management or whatever, the coordinators came and told all the comics, hey, don't say anything about his wife. The celebrity's wife actually died just 2 weeks back or 3 weeks back or something. Very recent. And it was like a gory thing, like a suicide or something.
Oh, sweet.
Something like that. So Norm was saying, I was just looking at this. These people come and say, hey, don't touch that.
Yeah.
And all the comics go, oh, come on. Like, oh, shit. And Norm is like, what? And man, that just tells you. But they made the mistake of inviting Norm for one of these roasts. Yeah. And you have to watch it. It's on YouTube.
I think I did watch it.
And he completely turned the format on its head.
Yeah.
And he started cracking some 1950s, 1960s type of jokes.
Yeah.
Purposely. And no one was getting them. Like the audience was expecting some insults.
Yeah.
But what Norm was doing, they were not able to get at all.
Yeah.
The only people who got them were other stand-up comics.
Yeah.
And they were rolling on the floor.
Yeah.
So
I think I've seen
always did
this. Yeah, I see. Because Norm, I think somewhere he mentioned that he himself was influenced by, all these guys.
Yeah.
Right? The Don Rickles, the Dean Martin shows, Foster Brooks, and it shows.
Yeah.
It shows the maturity in his humor, right?
It's more classical.
It has such an
sophistication.
finesse.
Finesse.
The word I would like to use is finesse, because that's the word I use for Don Rickles also.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the word I use for all the the comics that I really like, because I like the finesse aspect. And that finesse comes from, I think we had so many talks. It comes from a lot of practice. It comes from, trial and error. It comes from failing multiple times trying to deliver that, or whatever you call it.
It comes from empathy also.
It comes from empathy. It comes from, sometimes it's natural for some people.
Yeah.
Right? But whatever it might be, it's not forced upon. You don't find yourself being pushed to a corner just so that you laugh. Which I find that in today's comics.
Yeah.
And when I say today's comics, again, I'm talking more about the Indian stand-ups, right? They keep pushing you with a joke to a point where you're like, okay, fine, my back is to the wall. I'll do whatever you want me to do. You're like, okay, fine, I'm laughing. That is safe. That's not like you're giving what your audience want, or you just are
catering.
You're catering to a certain this thing, right? And these guys never did that, which I really appreciate. And this also disappoints me, because that art is not being passed on, and we are losing people who can potentially pass it on. More and more of them.
Yeah, we're losing people with that finesse, with that classical style, but we're also losing, I would say, authentic comedians who fulfill that need of, like, from an audience perspective, they fulfill that need of someone being brave enough to actually say something that's on everyone's mind.
Yeah.
And kind
speak people's heart.
Speak people's heart and speak truth to power and all that stuff. We are kind of losing all of them one by one.
Yeah.
And like Patrice O'Neill, Norm MacDonald, the other thing that they elevated to an art form is to how to be a talk show guest.
Yeah.
Norm was one of the best talk show guests ever, like Letterman, Conan O'Brien.
I would still vote Don Rickles, but
he came before.
Yeah.
And that's a different level.
Ever.
I don't think we can compare.
Okay, if I have to put it on a platform, yes. Somebody comes to me and says that, okay, you have 50 episodes. You can call 50 guests. Who would you call? These would be the guys. In any order. I don't care. Like Norm, Don Rickles, Rodney Dangerfield, another favorite guest of mine who I would love to watch.
Norm also loved him.
Yes, because again, Rodney Dangerfield was one of his kind. Right? It's just one-liners which never fucking ended.
Yeah.
Like, how many can you think?
Yeah.
Like, in half an hour, you're throwing 60, 70 one-liners and everything is equally funny.
Yeah.
I also like, I keep forgetting that guy's name. Yeah. Merv Griffin.
Merv Griffin.
Yeah. The guy who's like Jesus, he made fun of Jesus and all. I like that guy. I would want to see him on a talk show. I don't know if I've seen any time. Stephen Fry.
Oh, yeah.
Another great John Cleese.
Yeah.
John Cleese. So there is, like, all these guys for me, they understand the concept of what the audience wants.
Yeah.
Audience don't want to know what clothes you wore, how much of money you spent where, or who did you chit chat with.
Yeah.
In fact, even David Spade, because I've seen this one episode, and this is an Ellen show. It was after Ellen's big ass birthday party. Okay. And David Spade just takes the audience through his experience of going to the party.
Oh, okay.
And he starts off by saying, thanks a lot for inviting. I mean, I was so obliged. The $50 cover charge was too much, but it's okay. You're rich. You can do whatever.
Yeah.
And then he goes on. Okay.
Yeah.
And Ellen doesn't talk for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And he's just talking random stuff. He's like, I suddenly met Kim. And I was like, hey, Kim, what are you doing here? And then I realized she was actually looking behind me. So he was telling very simple jokes. Okay.
Yeah.
But his narration, his storytelling was so beautiful. And he did that 2-3 times in Ellen's show. So David Spade, again, as someone who doesn't come often, okay, but I really like him as a talk show host.
Yeah.
Talk show guest, sorry. Mel Brooks from the age-old, Mel Brooks. Again, one of the best storytellers. There's a guy called Bud Spencer. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah, I heard the name.
Yeah, Bud Spencer he has a weird Yiddish accent. It's like kind of Sean Connery, but it's very funny. So if you give me like 20-30, and the one single thing that these guys can do better than a lot of people is they're amazing storytellers. They can just pick up a very simple incident and make it like such an interesting story.
Yeah.
Right? That you're like wrapped with attention. You're like, dude, I really want to know how this ends.
Yeah.
And even better part is, you as an audience don't have to follow the story from the beginning. Even if you hear it from the middle, you still are as curious as a person who's been sitting before you and like listening to the story, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I miss a lot in today's guest or whatever.
Yeah, and for those listening, if you're interested in checking out Norm's work, there's a lot of clips on YouTube. You can just search Norm MacDonald, or there's a channel called I'm Not Norm, which is an amazing channel. They keep putting up clips of Norm from everywhere. And Norm himself actually had a podcast or a talk show on YouTube. And then Netflix invited him to have a talk show there. There he had guests like David Spade, Drew Barrymore, David Letterman. All these episodes were really great.
Even Adam Sandler was close to
Adam
Norm,
Sandler, yeah. So all of Norm's material, if you watch it, if you're not familiar with him, you'll get a taste of, what something real or something authentic is. The courage was something that always stood out for me personally.
Yeah.
Like he used to go to extreme left-leaning shows in the 90s, and he used to make jokes on Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, murdering people. And they used to be like, shut up, like literally on the air.
Yeah.
And it's just, man, there was no one like him, and I don't think there'll ever be.
You should also check out
another like him.
Norm MacDonald going about political correctness.
Yeah.
Oh, it's one of the most hilarious takes. The beauty is these guys have some ridiculous perspective about these things where you're like, oh shit, I didn't even like, how many people think about it this way, For me, it is raw power of, you can say comedy, you can say intelligence, perspectives, give any name, right? But it is all so raw. It's not like, you can see the rough edges of whatever they do, right? And they're always so close to the laser beam. And you're like, oh shit, now he's got into trouble. But they are just never in trouble because they just know the boundaries. They know how to play within their forte. And like you said, they never cross the line.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to do it.
They always knew where the line was.
Yeah. And it is so difficult to do it, right? I'm sure people who cross the line also know where the line is. But it's just that they have that adrenaline rush or they have that success factor in their head saying that now I can do anything. The finesse. Yeah, exactly. That's where the finesse aspect comes. Like Don Rickles for 70 years or whatever his career lasted, right? Never did you see him cross a line.
Yeah. And the bummer was not just that Norm passed away. That was, of course, a huge bummer.
Yeah.
But it also reminds you that of all these people who go early, like Norm, he was not really old enough to have...
He's 61.
He is quite young in terms of the lifespan.
Yeah.
So that reminds you again, Patrice O'Neill. Gone diabetes. It reminds you Terry Jones of Monty Python.
Yeah.
Dementia.
Yeah. Robbie Williams, for me, again, someone who I really liked.
Yeah. And
depression.
The thing is, like, why does it make it much more of a bummer is, that you don't have the same mold or anyone else in that same mold now. Yeah. And if you see line by line, whatever examples you had of courage and authenticity and finesse or sophistication, whatever, if that is going off and you have this feeling that I'm now left in a world filled with
filth.
Yeah.
Filth.
Because...
And that includes us, by the way.
Yeah, of
like
course.
If people are thinking that, no, we are a different breed. No, it includes us. And what pisses me off is you only can do so much.
Yeah.
And you just don't, I almost sometimes feel, and this is true story, yeah? I almost sometimes feel like I should have done whatever I can just to get locked in a room or an elevator with Don Rickles, right? And then steal his brain or something like that, and then preserve it. I don't need Einstein's brain. I need brain of a guy like Don Rickles, where pure humor or pure, whatever you call the raw power of humor is emitting, out of that brain. And I need to save brains like that. World will be a better place. That's my concept of saving the world. Like get Norm MacDonald's brain, get Patrice O'Neill's brain, get Richard Pryor's brain, right? Get all the guys who invented in a way how raw humor is, and then save it, and then we'll figure out what to do with it later.
Humor, for those listening again, humor is not just something that is a simple thing that it just makes me laugh.
Yeah,
it is also a little bit. There's a whole lot to humor. And speaking of, the first season.
I was about to say, humor is also a ThyGap episode, a two-parter episode.
Episode. Quite popular, actually.
Very popular.
Yeah.
It deserves to be a 5-parter at least because there's so much to it. At least that we understand of. There's a lot more than we understand of humor.
Yeah.
But it has its own power.
It's very powerful, and that's the reason why it's one of the first targets. When the society turns, one of the first targets is
humor.
Yeah,
you get those
and
guys
art.
out.
And it reminded me of Watchmen, bro, that legendary book that I keep telling you to read, and I gifted it to you, but you never read.
I did.
Oh, you did?
What's wrong with you? I read like the first page, and then you came, and then we spoke about what to order.
Right.
And then we started ordering. Then the food came. Then we ate the food. And then, how we spilled the sauce on the second page. And I was like, oh, let it dry and I'll read it again. And that's what happened.
But basically, just to give a brief synopsis, in Watchmen, the story leads to a world-ending event almost.
Yeah.
Apocalyptic. And the one event that kickstarts that whole chain of events is a comedian dying.
Yeah.
So that whole book treats that as a bad omen.
Yeah.
A comedian dying. And for me, when I read that book, I was just appreciating it. I read it many years back. So I just appreciated that, wow, I really like the importance that they gave the comedian.
Yeah.
But also, I really like how they structured their story to keep that coming. So whatever bad things happened in the story, right? People were like, they were just shrugging their shoulders and saying, that's what happens.
Yeah.
The comedian died.
Yeah.
What do you expect? know? And for me, every time they kept calling back to the death of that comedian, it hit again and again.
Yeah.
So I really loved that. But when you see people like Norm, and Petrie and all these guys passing away, it really sinks in now that, oh shit, that metaphor applies to our real life as well.
Yeah.
So a comedian like that dies. It's really a bad omen for all of us.
Yeah.
Because we don't have originals left like that. And what we have is the bunch of contemporary comics. And don't get me wrong, like not all of them are bad, but many of them, it's like a pit of, how do I put this?
Sheep.
Insecure, passive-aggressive, vindictive little fuckers with a chip on their shoulder with a whiff of male feminism about them. If I have to describe these guys, many of them, this is the mold they fit in. And if any of you come across anyone like called a male feminist, that's code for run.
Yeah. I would describe them as not funny.
Plainly put,
yeah. Okay, so I don't have a problem with what kind of style they have or what jokes they crack and all that. My problem is more primitive in nature, which is the art has an application.
Yeah.
The art of comedy, right? Or the art of being a comic, stand-up, whatever format you say. It has an application. It has a real-time value in the society.
Yeah.
It is not purely to just like make people laugh or entertain. It's way too more powerful, right? Like for example, when you look at the comedy of Dave Chappelle, you see an implication of, okay, you know what? It's a reflection of what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
So, this is bad.
Yeah.
I'm laughing at it, but it's not bad to laugh at it.
There is an aftertaste.
Yeah, there is like, that, the heartburn.
Yeah.
You look at Monty Python. It's the same thing, right? The whole life of Brian and what happened, aftermath.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The Holy Grail, whatever you take it, right? It's just that, am I taking all this too seriously, right? Oh, I can actually afford to step back and, look at it in a different lens.
Yeah.
Patrice O'Neill. Oh, yeah. I think, again, I'm sure a lot of people don't know him.
They don't, because...
At least in this side of the world.
He never chased publicity.
Yeah. He was so happy doing cellar comedy and all that.
Yeah.
But again, Patrice O'Neill, one of those guys, like you said, comedian's comedian, right? He has a very realistic approach to things.
I was going to say that, like radical, almost brutally honesty.
Yeah, and he would make it funny, obviously, right? That's the skill. And that's what I miss. I miss that layer of comedy. Like even if you look at Johnny Lever, okay? I mean, I don't know if people have actually followed his stand-up, but if you saw his stand-up material, right? It came from a certain social stigma.
Yeah.
And that's a layer I love to talk about. That's the layer I want to laugh about. That, you know what? Yes, it's a reality. Yes, it's funny. Yes, I'm laughing at it. But hey, I'm not forgotten it.
That one drunkard joke of his that you told me.
Right?
That one is right up there on the level of these other guys.
Yeah. Johnny Lever, I think, is unfortunately taken as more of a comedic actor than a comic himself. His comedy at a raw level is unprecedented. He is beautiful. As a single solo act comic, he is unbelievable. It's just that he's been dumbed down for our industry and our movie, this thing, which is not wrong again. I'm not complaining. But I really wish if Johnny Lever was set loose with the stage, I bet you that he could pull off like a Netflix original all by himself.
Oh, absolutely.
He wouldn't even need 3-4 groups. Like what Kapil Sharma does. That is what I miss in today's this thing. It's all about engineering jokes. It's all about girlfriend jokes.
Hostel jokes. It's all just anecdotes.
Yeah, they're anecdotes. I want real comedy. Give me a real comedy.
Yeah.
Show me that you got balls to, make fun of a god. Show me that you have fun.
They can't do that, but they get really screwed.
Which is where your finesse is tested.
Exactly.
Right? I'm not asking you to abuse God.
Yeah.
I'm saying make fun of God.
Yeah.
It is okay. You have funny things on God to say. Right? In movies, you do that. Right? You put God as a second person or a third person and then make him the funny character. So it's not wrong. But you got to have the amount of conviction you need to bring that finesse. Right? And the reason I'm talking about God is in our scenario, in our society, he's the biggest taboo, right? You can't make fun of God.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I'm taking it an example. But there's so many such examples, right?
I feel like death is a challenging subject also for a comedian to go to death and make it fun.
Like pick those things. Like that's where I'll understand. That's where I, as an audience, I am growing along with you. Or I'm just a dickhead who's just laughing for your jokes and then going back home and crying about my job or my wife or my family or my lifestyle or my financial status, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's what I miss in these guys. And that's what I am afraid of. That whole attitude towards humor will die with these guys passing away day by day. And then we'll be left with being sensitive to, I'm afraid of the day where I'm like, can I tell you a joke? Can you assure me on like a bond paper that you'll not get offended if I tell you this joke?
Yeah.
I'm afraid that day will come.
We're already at a day where in the US, like even comedians like Dave Chappelle have to have everyone's mobile phones locked away and stored elsewhere so that they don't record
the stuff. Yeah.
Because then it can be taken out of context and all that stuff. So it's already gotten that stage. And which other area have we seen this degradation? Talk shows.
Yeah.
We've seen this in talk shows.
Oh, sweet Lord. Don't even.
Like we had some amazing talk shows. I mean, when I say we, I don't mean in India.
Yeah.
But in the US.
No, we had. We had one.
No, I'm not saying we never had.
Yeah.
I'm saying the ones I'm talking about right now. It's more David Letterman, Craig Ferguson,
Johnny Carson's.
Johnny Carson. I never watched that much, so I don't know. I only watched.
No, but clips. Even I didn't watch it real time. But by the clips you can make out that he
was the OG.
Yeah,
everyone kind of tried to be.
Yeah. Jay Leno took over Johnny Carson.
Yeah,
right?
Jay Leno took over Carson, but
I didn't like Jay Leno.
Yeah, I mean, actually, comedians respect him for his comedy and for his stand-up. But once he became a talk show host, he kind of played to the role to a T.
Yeah,
and because all he wanted to do was build a garage and store like 500 cars.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And apparently, he never spent his money.
Yeah, he's not that flashy spender. So Dave Letterman, Craig Ferguson, Conan O'Brien.
I have few from the British side.
Yeah,
Jonathan Ross, Graham Norton.
Yeah, I watched a couple of because John Cleese actually had interviews, so I watched it. There was a guy called Michael Parkinson who used to be really famous. Like he was the guy to go and have a talk show with.
Yeah.
So he was one of the most famous hosts at that point of time.
Yeah.
So all of these guys, like one by one, they kind of left.
Retiring.
Now Conan was the most recent one.
I know, it's a bummer. Craig left very recently.
Oh no, it's been a while.
How long? But it's not been more than 5 years.
Yeah, I think around 6, maybe 6.
Yeah,
or 7
2016,
years.
17.
Yeah.
So Craig Ferguson left. One of I didn't follow him much, but you did.
Oh yeah.
But whatever I saw, I could make out that this guy knows his shit. Conan O'Brien, someone who followed. I really like him.
Yeah.
The reason I like him is he doesn't play the part.
He's actually a writer.
He's a writer and he's a stand-up himself. Obviously.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, very little, but he was actually.
He's like Adam Sandler.
He was actually a writer.
Yeah.
Who kind of fell into the role of the host.
Yeah.
And so he brought that sensibility into this.
I think he was that funny writer guy.
He was a funny writer.
Right? Like he was not so great at comics.
He wrote for talk shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the reason I liked him was he was very, he was never playing the role of a guest. Like he played himself, which is another commonality between all these guys. All good hosts, right? They play themselves. They don't try to overdo it. And once again, the art of talk show is making somebody talk.
Yeah.
It's not about you talking.
Yeah.
And I think all these guys did a great job in making people talk. Right now, my favorite is Graham Norton. Norton.
Yeah, Graham Norton, I have to say, I mean, the level of energy and like every episode and how easily he does it, it's so hard.
Yeah.
If I had to do one episode of that, I'd probably at the top of a bridge,
Yeah.
ready to go. Like I can't do that.
Yeah. And he makes everybody look so comfortable.
Yeah.
There is a very calm vibe about the whole thing. Even Jonathan Ross, it is a very weird format. So he introduces his guests who are sitting in a lounge behind stage, and they're all watching the show from the lounge. Okay,
Right.
and he actually shows them that these are the guests, and he talks to them in the lounge also, like in the back show.
Right.
Like, hey, how are you feeling there? Blah blah blah. And then he calls them. And he's so good, by the way, that Cristiano Ronaldo, who we all know, the only talk show that he went to was Jonathan Ross' talk show in UK.
Okay.
And not just he did his part and walked away, which is what happens in David Letterman's and all, right?
Yeah.
This guy actually sat through the whole show, where another guest after him came, then another one came, and he just sat there like listening to everybody.
Yeah.
So that takes a lot from like a host, I feel, right? And there's so much to learn from them. Like you can put it in your YouTube channels, how you want to conduct your YouTube interviews and all.
Yeah.
You can use that anywhere. But unfortunately, we are left with Rajiv Masan doing a roundtable conference or whatever, actors roundtable. He does a good job. I won't deny that. But
he's like the Boria Majumdar of the film world. Like,
yeah.
Same. Tell
Please.
me.
Please.
I get the same
Oh,
vibes.
shit. How can we forget that? Please, once tell me. Please, I beg you. Please tell me what went into making Tanaji. Yeah. So, but it's a dying art. We have to realize that and we have to somehow save it.
Yeah, and Craig Ferguson has always been my favorite. What I really like about him is he grew up in Scotland. He's from Scotland.
Yeah.
He was a stand-up there, musician as well. Very rough crowd.
Yeah.
A rough life. 70s, etc. Got hardcore into all kinds of things, but mainly he was a hardcore alcoholic. Then he turned his life around. He kicked the habit, came over to the US and started this talk show. But the guy was just a man's man, full of courage, full of empathy, full of kindness.
Yeah.
And he just did what he thought was right. He always stood behind his convictions, even though you have to imagine for an American cable TV audience, if you tell the NBC show, I mean, it's one thing that his talk show was owned by Dave Letterman, but even then, they were not able to digest some of the things that he did. Like once, he was inviting Stephen Fry over, and he knew that Stephen Fry is not a guy that you invite for 5 minutes and you just say bye and push him off. The guy can talk. Yeah. And it's worthwhile listening to that guy talk.
Absolutely.
And he's been friends with him for a very long time. So he said, screw this episode, I'm not going to have any audience. I'm not going to do any bits. Start to end, it's just going to be a conversation. So what Craig Ferguson did actually, he did video podcasts before they were video podcasts.
Before there was podcast maybe.
Before they were podcasts even.
Yeah.
And that episode is still considered to be one of the best episodes in talk show history. And he invited Archbishop Desmond Tutu like that for an episode. No late night talk show host was going to invite someone like that.
Right.
And there was a phase where Britney Spears went crazy and she shaved her head, if you remember.
Yeah.
This guy was the only guy. He opened with a monologue on his show, almost like serious, like talking about how that was such a wrong thing to have happened and how we as a society should kind of, react to that or respond to that. And that was like actually very mature and it was almost too mature for the US.
Yeah.
For him to do that.
I think everything is too mature for US.
Pretty much. But
wearing a mask is too mature for a US.
But, partly credit to them also for allowing these formats to be invented and discovered, because I just keep thinking, when you talk about Johnny Lever, like what if at the peak in his prime, in India also we had that framework for a stand-up special, that respect, like imagine what he could have done with that.
I think it's a fair point, but once again, I mean, I don't think there is any time restriction with that, in the sense like, that time this wasn't there. It's humor is humor. It's just about like ensuring that it goes to as many people as you want. Because I think the only guy in the Indian circuit who ever even tried his hand at monologues or stand-up was Shekhar Suman in Movers and Shakers.
Yeah.
And without doubt, it still is probably the top one talk show that was ever done.
Yeah, say what you will about that show, but it was the best talk show that we've had till date.
Yeah. And he was a ridiculously amazing host.
Yeah.
I think he had that suave about being the host, controlling, the conversation. His monologues were freakishly funny. Because he would impressions, he did jokes, he did bits.
Yeah.
Like he did all that, right? I still remember he doing Lalu Prasad Yadav's this thing and Vajpayee's this thing. And that was comedy, He made fun of everything.
Yeah.
Right? He mocked everything which was there to be mocked.
Yeah, and speaking of mocking and satire, our own Chappelle show way back then was Jaspal Bhatti.
Jaspal Bhatti.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The quality was exactly up there.
I mean, you can't, like you said, compare.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the context of the Indian scenario, Jaspal Bhatti was way ahead.
Talk about finesse.
Finesse.
By the way.
Yeah.
The way he dealt with the subjects.
And they were all serious problems, right? They were like people using cheap material in constructions and people are dying.
Yeah.
Not having a telephone, just to get a telephone connection, the kind of ordeal and a middle class man would go through.
Yeah.
You name it, right? Like this.
The mind-numbing time waste around office meetings. Which goes on to this day.
Yeah.
My God.
I still remember. I mean, do you remember how it ends?
No.
Oh, so basically there's a reporter, right, who's waiting to figure out what happened in the meeting. And everybody comes out and Jaspal Bhatti, यार आज तो बहुत ही कमाल हो गया. हम लोग पूरे मिलके एक unanimous decision पे आ गए पहली बार. तो the reporter is like, what is the decision?
Yeah.
कि हम अगले मीटिंग करेंगे अगले हफ्ते. It is so fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
Right? And we miss all of them. Even Jaspal Bhatti died way younger than what
way too early.
What, 50s, mid-50s, freakish accident.
Much before his time.
Yeah, way before his time. Which keeps, creating that urgency where you are like, save these guys. Save their art. Like, figure out how we can save them. Let's go back to them. Let's make them popular. Or, I don't know, like, you name it, right?
Even to this day, I mean, there are so many clips of Craig Ferguson's talk show on YouTube.
Yeah.
Even to this day, people keep adding comments. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I did not know about this when it was live, when it was going on. And now, every time I feel low, every time I feel depressed, I just have to come here and watch this. It makes me so happy.
Yeah.
It's 10 years he did that show.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best talk shows I've ever seen.
Yeah. But yes,
the comedians are dead, bro.
The comedians are dying at a rapid pace. And like the Great Watchmen book says, it's supposed to happen. What's the line in Watchmen?
They just shrug their shoulders like, when things keep getting worse and it goes closer to that world-ending scenario, they all just shrug their shoulders and what do you expect?
Yeah.
The comedian died. The
Yeah.
comedian is dead. This is what is going to happen.
Yeah. It's a much bigger problem than climate change, geopolitical issues, financial structures falling. It's a very big problem. We just don't seem to be realizing it.
If you can't laugh, then you can't dream. If you can't dream, you can't imagine. If you can't imagine, what are you going to do with your life?
Yeah. You have to listen to ThyGap podcast. That's what it will come to.
Every Thursday.
Every Thursday. You have to come back, switch on the ThyGap podcast and 1 hour of that. Do you really want the world to come to that point that the whole world, ThyGap podcast is being broadcasted on loudspeakers like the Nazi time where, you're being...
I wouldn't complain.
We wouldn't.
Yeah.
But as long as it is being broadcasted through a YouTube channel or something.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And it is monetized.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But up till then, bogus. Like the comedian says,
ThyGap, subscribe.
And share. Before all the comedians die.
Hey, thanks for listening. You can follow this podcast on Spotify to get notified of new episodes every Thursday. We're also on Apple Podcasts for those of you who have partaken in the forbidden fruit. If you liked what you heard, leave us a 5-star rating and a comment. Say anything like the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. A rating and a comment really helps us out. It's free, and I'm told that's a great price. But enough about us, huh? Tell us about yourself. Leave us a comment. Our Twitter is @ThyGap and we are _ThyGap on Instagram.